Hello and welcome to episode 27 from the Self-Publishing Formula.
Two writers, one just starting out, the other a bestseller. Join James Blatch and Mark Dawson and their amazing guests as they discuss how you can make a living telling stories. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello, here we are back again, Mark Dawson and James Blatch with you with the SPF Weekly podcast. And Mark, this is a good day today. If people are listening to this on launch day, which is Friday, the 27th of August, they can get some really good extra value today because you are preparing at this very moment for a webinar with our friend Nick Stevenson, aren't you?
That's right. So, that's going to be this evening this afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. in the UK. Nick and I are going to be talking about the training that he's offering right now to build your mailing list, sell more books, all that kind of good stuff. They're always good sessions with Nick. He's got a really good style of presentation, works really well. He's a funny guy. We tend to have a bit of a laugh at the same time. So definitely worth people turning up for that. The sign-up link is at selfpublishingformula.com/Nick, selfpublishingformula.com/Nick. And if people are interested, I would recommend registering sooner rather than later because we can only take 1,000 people on the call, and I think we're edging up towards that now. There'll also be a replay, and so if you can't attend and you'd like to be notified about that, then just sign up and we'll send that out probably the day after.
And I should say Friday the 26th of August is the day that this is released, and not the 27th, episode 27, confusing. So Friday the 26th of August, which is release day for this. Sign up now in the next few hours. As Mark says, even if you think you might not be able to make the live webinar, you will get an invite for the replay if you're on the list, and that URL again, selfpublishingformula.com/Nick.
Correct.
Hey, excellent. Look, we've got a really a good interview this week, quite an interesting one actually, and this is going to be one that's going to be of great interest for anybody who's in the stage now of launching a book, or even if you've got a couple of books but you've never quite got your sales going to really kickstart your career, because we are always interested in hearing the stories and hearing the detail about how people make themselves successful as self-publishers. And this guy actually emailed me out of the blue, and we had a chat over email, and very quickly I became very interested in how he had done this. And it's a very commercial approach right from the beginning. He and the person who he was marketing the books for, the author, so he's not in that sense self-published, he's done basically the self-publishing job for somebody else. But they took a brutalist commercial view right from the beginning, before a word was written of the first book, to work out what was going to be successful. And he explains in great detail in this interview how they went through the process. And I think they're looking at certainly a six-figure income for the first year of this self-publisher's career, which is obviously fantastic. So his name is Gabriel Mercer, and I think you're going to enjoy this interview. So we get contacted from time to time by listeners from the podcast. And when Gabriel Mercer contacted us, we thought this is interesting because Gabriel had talked about a project to get a writer launched. And over a few month period, they went up to, I think, something like a $50,000 revenue. And we'll talk to Gabriel in a moment about that. But there were a few things that stood out that were different from the approach that they took. So I'm delighted to say Gabriel joins us from the eastern side of the United States. Gabriel, are you?
Yes, right around Florida area.
Are you in Florida? Sunny Florida. Wonderful. Okay. Well, Gabriel, just talk us through this project then, how you approached it. And first, what was the books, the subject, etc., and what was your starting point?
Right. I come from a technology background. So books to me are completely foreign, or they were up until probably about a year and a half ago. And a friend of mine who knew what I did in tech was talking to me about digital marketing and said, look, I have an author who wants to, quote unquote, pick your brain. Sit down with you at a coffee shop and spend hours kind of trying to learn everything about digital marketing in a matter of minutes, which never works. But I agreed because it's a good friend of mine. And so the author and I sat down at a Starbucks local to me, and she had really good questions, which I answered. And by the end, I thought, okay, well, that was fun. I need to go back and do real work. So I I used kind of my same typical consulting offer that I make. I'm like, look, if you want more of my time, you just have to pay me. And that usually will kind of exit anyone who is not serious. Well, she kind of took me aback and jumped all over the opportunity and was like, absolutely, I would love to pay you for time. So we started working together from that point on. And the thing about this project was she committed to it in a way that I think I hadn't seen from a lot of other authors. Most people decide kind of that they want to write a book, and then they decide what the book is going to be about, and then they bring it to market. And she kind of reversed that whole process. She looked at what the market was doing. She decided where the opportunity was, and then she went ahead and wrote not just one, but 3 full novels before ever going to market. That process for us was what ultimately led to, I think, most of the success.
What, the way that she approached her writing and her business?
Exactly. It was a commitment to quality, and she treated it like a business from the very beginning. She was disciplined. She was focused. She put a lot of hard work in. She's still continuing to be patient about results, even though I think what she's done is tremendous.
Yeah, well, that's something that we do talk about all the time. And you do get some resistance. Some authors don't like the idea of being business people. But I guess that's where you come in then, Gabriel, because actually we get asked quite a lot by authors. Mark gets emails, can you run my campaigns for me? And his answer, because he's a very busy man, he's got several businesses on the go, is you wouldn't be able to afford me because of the time I would take out from the other businesses. But actually, if you make it your specialism, and I guess you do bits and pieces for other people, this is the missing link for some people.
It is. And I think a lot of the key to an author's success is just acknowledging that, particularly in self-publishing, there is not just one role. There's not just the writer anymore. This is something that actually goes back to, if you look at old Tony Robbins, his business mastery program, he talked about this exact same thing. In any company, there are 3 roles, and he calls them the talent, the leader, and the entrepreneur. For the writer market, it's really the artist, the director, and the producer. So you have kind of the art side, which is this idea of creating fiction and doing this creative activity that's a form of expression and bringing that product to life. And then on the other side, you have kind of the other 2 pieces, which are the ability to run and manage an outsourced team or a project. And then there's kind of the social side, the influencer outreach, the working with readers and talking one-on-one to other authors and kind of moving the needle through networking. And each one of those is a completely different skill set. And unfortunately, for most self-published authors, you have to be really good at all 3.
Yeah, that is one of the tricks, isn't it? Okay, so let's go back to the project then. So had she finished her first book when she first came to you?
She had not written anything when we first talked, not at all. It was pretty surprising. She had just done enough research to know that she wanted to write. It was kind of an old hobby for her when she was in college. And she was like, look, I want to write. I don't know what I want to write. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what that book is going to look like, but I know that this is what I want to try and do, and I want to do it professionally. And so we talked about how that would look, how long she would have to stay in a day job. And I said, look, I think the best way for you to approach this is think about romance as a market, obviously huge, bigger by twice from the next nearest market down. And I said, you really need to think about what your brand is going to be, because that's really what your focus needs to be. So she started writing and wrote 3 full-length contemporary romance novels, closer to the erotic romance side than the clean romance side, because that's, I think, still what is popular for the most part in that genre. And then she also made the decision to write new adult, so another really popular category right now. And that, I think, has been kind of the key to her success.
I mean, interesting that from your point of view, I guess ideal that somebody comes to you at that very early stage rather than having created maybe 3 different cross-genre books and give you a more difficult marketing task. So you could work together as it should be, really. Marketing and the product should be very closely aligned. So where did you start, Gabriel? I mean, what was your knowledge area of marketing and selling books?
I come from a background of tech. And so the way that I got into marketing and eventually information products, which I think books are a part of, is through the tech side. I started being a coder in school. I ended up through developing software and other information platforms to learning that the other challenge that a lot of businesses have is marketing. And then I eventually developed into the paid advertising side, which is kind of what led me to you and Mark, and what you guys are doing with Facebook ads, because that is definitely probably the hottest ad platform that exists right now. And so my path is kind of completely different than most would take to get to this. But I really think that most coders, especially guys who love to be kind of in the cave and just developing software, I think their artistry is pretty much the same as an author in a lot of ways. I've seen so many parallels between those two roles over the years.
Yeah. When you say a coder, do you actually mean a programmer, somebody who writes programming code?
Right. I was a developer. That's probably the proper term for it.
Yeah. Yes, I was in a previous life as well as a computer programmer in the old COBOL days, and I completely agree with you. There's an artistic element to computer programming that people don't appreciate. They think it's ones and zeros, but it actually is it's a far more artistic endeavor. So you had this outline, you got led to us to a self-publishing formula and presumably one or two other areas. And were Facebook ads your main thing? Because I think you said to us when you initially contacted us that you didn't use the perma-free route, which is almost like chapter 1 of the Bible for lots of people.
Yeah, I have really strong feelings about that. Having been in the information products market for as long as I have now, and having kind of built my whole career around that. That's how I made the bulk of my income. It's how I continue to make the income that I need to pay the bills. That's my day job, so to speak. I didn't like the idea of, well, first of all, I think it's hard to imagine somebody spending the amount of time that they spend building a story or a fiction property of any kind, and then only selling it for what for most authors I think is going to be less than $20 in every case. I don't think I've seen a book for more than that in a very long time. So that already is hard for me to wrap my mind around. And it's the reason I avoided books for so long, even nonfiction books, because I was like, that's not, the conventional wisdom in my world is that there is no money in books. It's a business card, or it's a tool to get to the other things that you really want to sell. And it wasn't until I saw what Mark was doing that I realized that the possibility of making a living from fiction is even possible. And that all kind of came together with this author being on my doorstep and saying, look, I'm willing to commit to this and make it a professional gig. So how can we do it? And that's when I started to dig. And perma-free, I don't know, it's not a philosophy that I buy into. And I can kind of get into why, but if you want to talk about that.
What I'm more interested in is what you did instead of it, because I think you did have some form of giveaway, didn't you?
We did. We still gave away things, just never the core product. So we gave away a Kindle Paperwhite loaded with 25 ebooks that were very market specific, so would appeal to the same demographic. The author spent a year and a half doing outreach to various authors in the genre that she was writing in, and making connections and doing the Tim Grahl relentlessly helpful mindset. Or maybe I guess a better example would be the Ryan Holiday Canvas strategy, where she just kind of worked for them without taking credit to buy herself some favors later on when her books were out. And all of that led her to the point where when she did finally release, she got a lot of forward momentum. But the giveaways, and in particular, the way that we kick things off with the mailing list, was just about a $500 buy-in to really, really promote and push and build her list as quickly as possible. And we ended up with 1,200 people. And in 1 week, I would say that's a pretty good list building effort.
You got 1,200 signups in a week. In a week,
yeah. And the good news is that I think in most cases, giveaways tend to, or at least they tend to attract people who are bargain seekers, right? They're people who are looking for the thing you're giving away.
Well, that's one of the dangers people are warned about with it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we were conscious of that. And so we did a really good job of making sure that our offer was very focused, and that we took care and nurtured those people afterwards to the point where we have a 75% retention rate after, and it's been 90 days now. So about 900 plus of those people are still sticking around. So
you cracked this holy grail of a giveaway, a competition, a contest actually, and with valuable leads, not just people who simply entered to try and win and then went off and didn't engage with you anymore. You actually had a very positive engagement rate afterwards.
Right. And I credit the author with that entirely. The strategy was there prior to me ever coming on board. I just simply pushed her to engage and nurture and treat those readers and those early subscribers as if they hadn't entered for the giveaway and that they really did care about what she was doing as a fiction writer. I think that turned the tide for her a little bit. She did a lot of work with those early readers, and she built a launch team from that of 30 people. Again, she's retained 75% of the readers. And now after 3 different books, she's, I think 31 reviews on one title, 20 on another, and 7 on another. And each one of those has been organic. She's really done a good job.
Remind me, did you say how much you spent on your ads in that week?
Well, we went really heavy in the very beginning. We were spending probably anywhere from $10 to $30 a day, just depending on, which book we were promoting. But I really went heavy on book 1, knowing that was going to be the introduction to the series and hopefully lead to read through later on. But that turned out to pay off. After 162 different variations, we finally hit on a combination of ads that drove clicks at anywhere from 12 to I think 19 cents, and it eventually leveled off at around 14, and it continues to perform well. We're actually still running it at about $10 a day right now, and that resulted in a break even and a little bit of a positive return, but not a whole lot. It was really more the exposure in the first month that we were looking for.
So you went very big at the beginning. You had your launch giveaway, which your launch giveaway. And how much did you spend on advertising for that to get the 1,200 leads?
Gosh, to get the 1,200, it was probably only a week's worth of advertising.
So a few hundred, 300 or 400 maybe if you were.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot. It was, maybe $100 even. It wasn't really a lot of money. That's
a very good value. So that worked really well for you. And now, if I remember this rightly from the way you wrote, you did line up the books to launch in quick succession and really make an impact with the top 10 lists or the top, what are they called? Best-selling lists as quickly as possible.
If I had to go back and do anything over again, that would be the one thing that I would probably change. I would space those releases out a little bit more. 3 weeks seemed at the time to be optimal. It gave us enough time to really push things out and try and brute force the bestseller lists and push the author's books into, visibility where Amazon hopefully then would pick it up and start marketing it. And I think that everything I've seen in the data since then indicates that the shelf life of even a new release is actually much longer than I originally anticipated. While there is a drop off at 30 days, I think it's probably closer to 6 months when a new title finally starts to lose steam.
So what you discovered is you actually have more time to not worry about momentum dropping away.
Yeah, I think a very slow, linear growth-like build is much better than that exponential spike that eventually drops off. And again, everything we've seen across all of the books that we've published now to date indicates that it's much better to build slowly over time and even release at a rate of once per quarter than it is to try and cram everything into a 30-day or a 3-week window as we did with her books.
So you did your launch. You had, how many books? Was it 5 at this stage?
She took a step back and was really overworked at one point. She was juggling a full-time job as a bookkeeper and I think a forensic accountant for a couple of companies that she was freelancing with, in addition to writing full-time and doing a heavy amount of outreach, again, with influencers, reviewers. She was even querying at one point looking for a traditional deal until I kind of talked her down from that. Actually, thank you, Data Guy over at Author Earnings, for talking her down from that.
Yeah.
So it was a lot for her to handle. And she said, you know what, I really, if anything has to give, I want to, knowing what we know about the space these books should be coming out, I want to dial back and focus on kind of promoting these properties that I have and making the decision to push off books 4 and 5 until later in the year. So that's slowed her growth considerably in the last probably 2 weeks to 3 weeks since the launch of her last book.
But in bottom line terms, so once you'd launched, you're getting towards the peak of your sales. Where were you getting? What were you hitting?
She is going to probably max out this year at 6 figures, is my guess.
Wow.
Yeah, and she's going to do really well. There's no doubt. And again, I think that is an outlier. I don't necessarily think that is normal. I would say that had we not done literally everything right, except for cramming all of these books into one small space as a release window, I think she probably would have come out closer to, I don't know, 20,000 in the year. But it just, something clicked. And I think whether or not she realized it, what she wanted to write lined up really well with what the market was looking for. So it all kind of came together in the right way and just exploded. And again, I don't think it's as much luck in my mind as it is just following a really good system, working hard, kind of doing all the things that you and Mark talk about on your podcast.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's not luck by the sounds of the methodical approach that you've taken to it. Did you get involved in cover design and formatting and all the sort of ancillary stuff as well?
I did a little bit, yeah. I have some background working as a partner in marketing agencies with design and art direction. Again, I'm by no means an expert. I kind of have an eye for what I think looks good, like I imagine many amateur art directors do. And being able to kind of pair that with, again, a strong testing methodology where, okay, this seems like it would work really well. Let's test 3 variations of it and figure out what actually works. The thing that I always love saying is that I make more money every time I'm wrong. So it's healthy for me to adopt this mindset of, okay, well, I'm going to take my best shot, but it's still just an assumption.
Yeah, and lots of valuable lessons coming out of this, but that constant split testing, constant reevaluation, constant optimizing of your campaigns. We do get, there clearly some people are. We talk about this on the podcast quite a lot, and I've seen today, actually, coincidentally, somebody who's been running campaigns for 2 or 3 weeks and is about to throw it all in because it's not worked. And you're thinking, well, there aren't many businesses in the world where after 21 days you've got it all cracked and there's your profit and you can go off and enjoy it. It takes some work, but you kept that agility going all the way through the campaigns. I'm certain you're still doing that now as you look. I mean, what have you got running at the moment and where are you in terms of campaigns?
So right now we are currently running 2 campaigns, one for, actually that just ended, I should say. We were running a campaign for a BookBub giveaway where we gave away, I think it was 10 signed copies of her book to a select audience. And it, I think 2,000 or 3,000 people requested the book. And I mean, it went really well. And we just mailed those out the other day. But the other thing that we're running is we're continuing to run that same $10 a day, really solid ad copy and ad imagery directly to her book. And that typically comes in at about 120% ROI. So it's not earth shattering, but it's enough to keep her sales at the level they need to be so that when people read through to the other books 2 and 3, as a result of those ads, those, are all profit for her.
Okay. So, Gabriel, you've proved that you can, I think you said in the email to me initially, you can absolutely jumpstart a career from zero. This is not a case of having to wait 2 or 3 years of slog. You can, if you get the stuff right at the beginning. I mean, you've chosen, obviously you had a quite good genre for this, but we get lots, Rachel Aaron last week and a couple of weeks ago, we have lots of authors who have very successful careers in niche genres as well. So I don't think we can all say that's what this is down to. So congratulations on that. It's really good. Can we know who it is? Is there any reason why we can't know who the author is?
She's asked me to keep her name private. I'm not entirely sure why, to be perfectly honest. She is just very conscious of getting the wrong kind of attention to her books, and she doesn't want to be known for the money that she's making. She kind of wants the work to stand on her own. I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic, but I'm just respecting her wishes in this case. Yeah,
I understand that, and that's certainly not for everyone. Is this something you think you can move on to another author with?
Well, I can definitely say that it can be replicated in romance. We are currently testing the exact same methodology across science fiction, fantasy, and soon we'll be testing with another author in thrillers. So there's lots of things lined up. The only thing I can say for sure is that it worked in this particular case with this author writing full-length contemporary romance. I don't know if the same will be true if we try mystery thriller. I don't know if the same will be true in science fiction, but I suspect that it will be, because a lot of the core tenets and principles that we're applying really, I think, are going to be the differentiators kind of going forward. And a lot of that was really assumptions on my part when we first started. And what I was really pleased to see was that a lot of the data is kind of bearing that out.
Well, if you get around to doing a kind of blog post on it, we'd probably feature you as a guest blogger on SPF, but certainly point people in the direction of anything you write down, because I think it's a very interesting way of looking at it. What particularly is interesting is your lack of emotional involvement in it. I mean, we all get emotionally involved in our business, but the fact that you're not the author does make you slightly different in this community, where mostly it's people themselves, and being able to slightly disassociate themselves from their author selves is an important part of approaching the business correctly. So I think people would want to learn from that, learn the way that you've approached it without it being your babies that are for sale.
It's really hard to take off that creative hat, something that you've poured, blood, sweat, and tears into over time, and look at it as purely an information product and really try to gauge how the market is reacting to that, or how your audience is responding to what they're reading. Because a lot of people don't want to hear it. And that's the truth. It's one of the reasons that I encourage all new authors to go out and get early feedback from any of their writing and get a gauge on how much work they're really going to have to do. Is it going to be a couple of years and a couple of bin novels, or is it going to be 10 years of daily work that you really have to, consider? And that's a big choice.
Great. Gabriel, thank you so much indeed for coming on to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast from sunny Florida. Although I have to say the 2 weeks I spent in Florida, it rained every day. But I drove around looking at behind cars, reading the Sunshine State on everyone's registration plates. But
they don't tell you that the summer is hurricane season and not to show up around that time.
I think we're going to be there in September in hurricane season. So, Gabriel, thank you so much indeed. It's been really interesting, and we'll keep in touch, and let me know when you put that down in writing. We'll get a link out to people.
Definitely. Thanks, James. I appreciate it.
So Gabriel did things a little bit differently. I mean, first of all, Mark, there's somebody, I mentioned to Gabriel in the interview that you get asked a lot by people, can you run my campaigns for me? And you always say that you couldn't afford me because obviously you're running quite a few businesses and your own publishing empire. But this guy's a digital marketing guy and who's had his interest piqued about self-publishing, and he's made a real success of this romance author's first 3 books. And they didn't have a perma giveaway, so they gave away a Kindle loaded with the free books that were of a similar genre, and that worked really well for them for an explosive list build over a couple of week period. And that was what the main difference, I think, between the way that we often talk to people about doing things, but it seemed to work for them. So a really interesting interview.
Yeah, it's interesting on giveaways. I'm a little more sanguine about doing those because I've done plenty in the past, and the danger is that you get people who want the free thing and not they're not so interested in your books. But if Gabriel has demonstrated that it's worked for him, it's something that is worth looking afresh at. It's, as I said, it's not something that I do, but maybe I'll take another look at it.
Yeah, it's different circumstances, and I think what you give away and how you pitch the adverts all make a difference in that front. But there's more than one way to skin a cat. Gabriel found us because he understands Facebook advertising, the power of social media advertising, and he was a big fan of what you were doing and the way you were teaching that. So that's how he found us, and then he thought that this story would be interesting. So I have asked Gabriel, you probably heard in the interview, if he'll do a blog post for us at some point in the future, because there's quite a lot of detail in the description of how he did that launch, and I think that would be interesting to hear. So, okay, we're coming back to talking directly to an author next week. We are going to talk to the wonderful Rachel Abbott, who is probably quite well known to a lot of self-publishing formula listeners. We actually spoke to her, didn't we, at the London Book Festival?
The book fair, yeah.
The book fair, yes.
He's great. One of the biggest selling KDP authors in the UK. Very well known. Is great fun to talk to. So that's definitely going to be something that people should look forward to next week.
Yeah, so we're going to talk to Rachel about productivity and tactics and sales, and she's somebody else who's a bit of a fan of yours, Mark, so there'll be a bit of mutual love there, but we'll hear a lot of original and interesting stuff from Rachel without question. So that will be SPF 28. We're looking forward to talking to you again. Thank you so much for listening. Now, don't forget, there is a fantastic webinar coming your way today, Friday, the 26th of August. If you're listening to this on launch day, you need to go to selfpublishingformula.com selfpublishingformula.com/Nick to sign up, and you will hear Mark Dawson and Nick Stevenson, two of the biggest, most valuable names you will hear in the self-publishing sphere. And Mark, can you give us a sneak peek of what you're going to be talking about?
Yeah, we're going to be looking at finding new readers. That's something that Nick majors on, something I major on too, of course, but it's going to be a valuable session. I've done webinars with Nick before. There's always notes to be taken and lessons to be learned. So we're looking at Nick's formula for adding new readers to your list. So definitely looking forward to that when I get on call with Nick later on today.
Great. selfpublishingformula.com/Nick to sign up for that webinar. And you can get all the show notes, of course, and everything else at selfpublishingformula.com. For this podcast, we look forward to talking to you in 7 days' time. Have a good week writing and selling, and we'll speak to you then.
You've been listening to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. Visit us at selfpublishingformula.com for more information, show notes, and links on today's topics. You can also sign up for our free video series on using Facebook ads to grow your mailing list. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next time.